Get ready to step into a house where secrets never stay buried and the supernatural is more real than you can imagine. Anne, the secret of the dark house will take you to a place where every corner hides mysteries, where an apparently harmless doll holds something far more terrifying, flickering lights, footsteps echoing in the empty, and whispers invading your mind. This is just the beginning. Do you have the courage to uncover the secrets this house is hiding? Click now and dive into this mystery that will keep you hooked until the very last second. Working in a home dedicated to clients with behavioral and mental disabilities requires patience, but also a kind of emotional resilience. I knew this before accepting the job, but I wasn't expecting what was about to come. The house, with its long, cold hallways, had an aura that was hard to ignore. Over time, rumors began to spread. They said the place had a dark past, something no one openly mentioned, but that seemed to pulse within the walls. It felt as if the house carried its own emotion, something between sadness and mystery, something I couldn't quite explain. It all started in an almost trivial way, lights flickering for no reason, footsteps echoing upstairs while everyone was downstairs, and objects that seemed to move on their own. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. After all, working in a tense environment can do that to you. But the incidents began to intensify at night. Whispering sounds would emerge from nowhere, and locked doors were suddenly open, as if someone, or something, had passed through unnoticed. One night, while making my nightly rounds, I heard a faint noise, almost like crying. I followed the sound to one of the empty rooms, and upon entering, I saw only a rocking chair moving slowly, as if someone had just gotten up from it. My heart raced, but no one was there. It couldn't be just a coincidence. With each new incident, the tension in the house grew, as though it wanted to reveal something, a secret I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. Anne was an old doll, simple in appearance, but somehow unsettling. She belonged to one of the clients, an elderly woman who rarely spoke but always carried Anne with her, as if the doll was an amulet or something even deeper. At first, no one paid much attention to the doll. It was just a toy worn by time. But as the days passed, I began to notice something strange. Anne wasn't always where she was supposed to be. She appeared in unlikely places, as if placed there by invisible hands. At first, it was easy to blame chance or the clients themselves, but the patterns became impossible to ignore. One evening, while organizing a cabinet, I saw Anne sitting in the middle of the hallway, alone. No one had passed by, and I was certain the client who owned her was asleep in her room. Swallowing hard, I picked up the doll and returned it. But what happened afterward left me on edge. A loud noise, as if something had fallen, came from the kitchen. When I got there, all the cabinets were open. The air felt heavy, as if fear had mingled with the weight of an unsolvable mystery. Over time, it became clear that Anne wasn't just an inanimate object. Whenever unsettling events occurred, doors slamming shut on their own, lights flickering, or even inexplicable murmurs, Anne was nearby. It wasn't a coincidence. It was as if the doll carried a presence, something that transcended the physical. Her eyes, though merely painted, seemed alive, following my every move. The tension was impossible to ignore, and the sense of danger grew stronger with each passing night. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. It was in this environment of mounting tension that something strange began happening to the staff. At first, it was subtle, almost unnoticeable. One of the employees, a young and dedicated man, showed up one day with strange bruises on his arm. He claimed he had slipped in the bathroom, but something about his story didn't add up. The floor had been dry, and the marks looked like something else. They had the shape of small hands, as if someone had gripped him tightly. He tried to brush it off, but his demeanor changed in the following days. He seemed restless, constantly glancing over his shoulder until, without warning, he quit his job and left, visibly shaken. What happened next was even more disturbing. Other staff members began reporting similar incidents. Unexplained marks appeared on their bodies, bruises, scratches, as if they had been targeted by something invisible. Each story was accompanied by strange sensations, the feeling of being watched or icy touches in moments of solitude. And there was one detail that couldn't be ignored. Every time something like this occurred, Anne, the elderly client's doll, was nearby, motionless, yet emanating an almost suffocating presence. The tension in the house reached new heights. The staff began whispering among themselves, trying to make sense of what was happening. Some attributed it to the stress of the job, while others were convinced that something more sinister was at play. The connection to the doll seemed undeniable. It felt as though Anne was a conduit for something hidden within the house, something that manifested in increasingly violent ways. Deep down, I knew this wasn't a coincidence. Anne was more than just an object. She was the epicenter of a danger we had yet to fully understand. Amid the house's many mysteries, Helen emerged as a central figure, Among all the clients, she was the most peculiar. A frail elderly woman with a distant gaze and an almost inaudible voice. She seemed detached from the world around her. She would spend hours sitting, holding Anne tightly, the doll never leaving her side. There appeared to be a connection between the two, something deeper than simple affection for an old toy. It was as though Anne was her only true companion, a link to something no one else could perceive. The more I observed, the more I realized that this bond carried an air of mystery, something that defied common understanding. Intrigued, I decided to investigate. I asked other staff members about Helen and her doll, but few knew anything concrete. One of them mentioned, almost jokingly, that Anne seemed to protect the elderly woman. Another recounted incidents where dangerous objects had fallen near Helen but never harmed her, as if some invisible force shielded her. However, there were also stories of coworkers who had gotten too close to the doll and felt chills, or worse, found themselves involved in unexplainable incidents. The emotion of being near Anne swung between fascination and terror. That's when I discovered something that sent chills down my spine. The name Anne wasn't just a nickname. While researching old records, I found a reference to a protective spirit in local legends, a guardian that turned vengeful when disturbed. The idea that the doll might be a channel for something supernatural made everything even more tense. Helen, who seemed so frail, might have been more powerful than we imagined, not by herself, but because of what accompanied her. The house, the doll, and the elderly woman were connected in ways that I couldn't yet comprehend. But it wouldn't take long for this truth to reveal itself in a clearer and more terrifying manner. It was on an especially quiet night that something unusual began to happen. I was sitting in the main room, reviewing reports, when the motion sensors in the hallway flickered. At first, I thought it was one of the clients wandering the house, but when I checked, the hallways were empty. As I returned to my seat, the lights activated again, this time in sequence, as if something was slowly walking from one end to the other. The atmosphere changed. The silence, once comforting, became heavy, almost suffocating. The sensors started going off at random intervals, each time closer to the room I was in. What made it even more disturbing were the whispers. Soft, distant, yet undeniably present. They were impossible to ignore, accompanied by disjointed words, as though someone was speaking in a language lost to time. Helen, the elderly woman, was awake, sitting in her rocking chair with Anne in her arms. Unlike me, she didn't seem frightened. In fact, she appeared to be listening intently. The whispers weren't meant for me. They were for her. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, Helen began to murmur. It wasn't a plea for help, but a conversation. Her eyes were fixed on Anne, and though her words were inaudible to me, they carried weight. It was as if she understood the whispers, as if she was part of that supernatural communication. Each time the sensors activated, her murmurs grew louder, creating an atmosphere thick with mystery and tension. That night wasn't ordinary, and I knew I was witnessing something the house had been holding on to for a long time. Driven by the need to understand what was happening in that house, I started digging through old files. Hidden in a dusty cabinet, I found records from the previous institution where some of the clients had lived. As I read through the reports, a dark pattern began to emerge. There were stories of neglect, cruelty, and systematic abuse. The clients who were now under our care had once lived through a true nightmare, marked by traumas that seemed to transcend time, and possibly even the physical space of the institution. One recurring detail in the documents was the mention of personal items the patients used for comfort. Among them, one description caught my attention. A rag doll, always referred to as the inseparable companion of one of the women, Anne. The name appeared in the records as though it were just a toy, but its impact was undeniable. The doll wasn't merely an object, it was a symbol, perhaps a safe haven for someone who had endured so much. However, the reports also hinted at Anne harboring a strange energy, described by staff from that time as unsettling. As the days went by, I began to realize that Anne was more than just an emotional refuge. She seemed to hold the trauma and pain of those who had touched her over the years, as if she were a vessel for the horrors endured. The connection between the doll and the pattern of abuse wasn't a coincidence. Anne was like an echo of the past, a constant reminder that suffering leaves marks, not just on people, but somehow on objects too. It was impossible to ignore the feeling that the entire house vibrated with this suppressed pain, as if waiting for something, or someone, to finally set it free. As the events in the house grew more frequent and unsettling, Anne's presence began to carry an even darker weight. I started to suspect that the doll wasn't just a symbol of the past or an emotional refuge for Helen. It was a channel, The whispers, the unexplainable movements, and even the marks on the staff's bodies all seemed to converge on the same origin. Anne. The theory forming in my mind was as terrifying as it was plausible. What if Anne was more than just a toy? Perhaps she was the manifestation of something far greater, something that didn't belong to our world. As I continued my investigation, fragments of a story began to emerge, connecting Helen and the doll on a deeper level. There were rumors that Anne carried the spirit of Helen's mother, a woman who, according to reports, had endured horrors at the institution that preceded the house. The nights I spent watching Helen murmuring to the doll took on a new meaning. This wasn't madness or a common delusion. She was communicating with someone, or something, that inhabited Anne. But it wasn't clear if this spirit was protective or vengeful. The doll seemed both a guardian and a warning, a reminder of the suffering embedded within its fibers. The incidents linked to Anne became impossible to ignore. One staff member reported severe chest pain, only to later realize no one had been around, except for the doll. Another described visions, flashes of people being harmed in darkened rooms. All of it happened with Anne always present. The house seemed suffocated by an energy emanating from her, a mix of pain and vengeance, as if she demanded the secrets of the past to be uncovered. And with each new event, the line between reality and the supernatural grew thinner. It all began with dreams. At first, they were disjointed fragments. A dark hallway, echoing footsteps, and a presence that couldn't be seen but could be felt. Over time, the dreams became more vivid. There was always a man, dark and imposing, who introduced himself as John. His cold, penetrating eyes seemed to see beyond my physical presence. It was as if he knew everything that was happening in the house, perhaps even more than I did. With each dream, John came closer, his intentions becoming clearer. He carried an uncontrollable rage, a murderous energy that left me paralyzed even after I woke. The visions started occurring during the day as well. While walking through the hallways, I could feel John's presence. I couldn't see him directly, but I knew he was there. Sometimes, I would see his shadow cast on walls where no one was standing, or hear a murmur that carried my name, spoken with an undertone of veiled threat. There was no logical explanation for his presence, but something about him seemed intimately tied to the house, perhaps to its hidden secrets, or to the people who lived there. The danger felt more real with every passing moment, and the tension grew like a shadow engulfing everything around it. Who was John? His connection to the house, Anne, or even Helen was unclear, but his presence was undeniable. In one of the visions, he appeared in the empty room where the rocking chair sat. When I entered, the doll was there, perfectly positioned, and the overwhelming feeling that John was standing right beside me was inescapable. He wasn't just a projection of my fear. He was something real, something the house held as part of its own darkness. Each night became harder to endure, and I knew that John wasn't there by coincidence. He had a purpose, and he was waiting for the right moment to reveal it. That night, the air felt different, heavy, as though something imminent was about to happen. The house seemed alive, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a warning. All the motion sensors flickered incessantly, and the whispers that were once distant were now clear, close, almost right in my ear. Anne was in the center of the room, carefully placed on the rocking chair, as if waiting for something. Or for me. My heart raced with every step, but something inside told me there was no more avoiding it. That night would be decisive. As I approached the doll, the energy in the room shifted. The lights stopped flickering, plunging the house into a darkness that seemed to have its own presence. Anne looked different. Her faded, painted eyes now appeared alive, fixed, and almost glowing. Then I heard a sound I would never forget. A low, chilling laugh echoing through the room. No one was there, but the presence was overwhelming. That's when I felt the cold, sharp and consuming crawling over my skin. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was an emotion, a mix of pain, anger, and despair that wasn't mine, but flooded over me like a wave. The truth revealed itself in a cruel way. Anne wasn't just a doll. She was a vessel for something otherworldly, an entity bearing the scars of pain and injustice tied to that place. The marks on the staff, the bruises, the accidents, all were part of a meticulous vengeance, a reaction to the atrocities of the past. The whispers confirmed what I feared. There had been deaths in the house, murders buried beneath layers of secrets, and Anne was both witness and instrument of this dark justice. As the rocking chair began to move on its own, I knew I was facing something far beyond my control. The next morning, the house was strangely calm, almost serene, as if the storm of the previous night had never happened. But inside me, the chaos remained. The events of the night before were etched into my memory, each detail too vivid to dismiss. Yet a corrosive doubt began to creep in. Had it all been real? Or was it just the product of exhaustion and accumulated fear? Anne was still there, sitting in the same rocking chair, as inert as ever. But her eyes, those painted eyes, seemed different. Were they merely illusions conjured by my shaken mind? The other staff members acted as if nothing had happened. No mentions of flickering lights, whispers, or strange presences. Only I seemed to carry the weight of that night. I tried to convince myself that I was the only one sensitive enough to see the truth. But what if it was something else? What if my mind was playing tricks on me? Looking at Anne made my chest tighten, as though she knew what I was thinking and was feeding off my doubts. The feeling of being on the edge of reality and imagination was paralyzing. The house continued to operate, its secrets buried beneath the routine of daily life. Anne remained there, motionless, but her presence was impossible to ignore. Everything seemed normal to those who didn't know what to look for. But to me, every corner of the house was steeped in memories of what had happened, or what I believed had happened. Perhaps that's what the house wanted. For me, never to truly know the truth, for the mystery to remain as alive as the pain it carried. The only certainty was that the doll would stay there, her eyes fixed, a silent guardian of a story no one dared to uncover fully. The story of Anne. The secret of the dark house doesn't end here, but the truth you've just uncovered is only the tip of the iceberg. If you thought you've seen the worst, wait until you discover what comes next. Don't leave this mystery behind. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and get ready for more dark secrets and spine-chilling stories.